What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Bryan Brozy. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Keone Tita. This is week 52, so we've done this for a year. So, Keone, how have you been this year?
Good. I mean, I'm loving it that we did this for a full year, and I'm loving doing it. So we're going to continue to do this today. I thought we just kind of review some of the highlights of over the year, some of the stuff that we learned.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then we've been doing it for a year without skipping a week. That's super impressive to me. I'm super happy about it, especially going with school. I feel like my entire life has changed. I moved and everything in that year.
Right. Yeah, well, same with me. I mean, finding the time, running a clinic and running a business, it's not easy, but I'm loving doing it. And with being healthcare providers, student healthcare providers, you are, and then me being a healthcare provider, it's like we're in this for life, and it's like it's constant learning and
Yeah.
trying to help. And I think we originally did this to, when we were talking about doing this, it was to basically not only educate ourselves, but to help other people out there. So it's a great resource for my patients. So over the year, I found that I'm just constantly, referring people to some of these episodes. So
Yeah.
they can go into more in depth with stuff.
Yeah, same here. I feel like our mission in the podcast has evolved from just kind of like a health podcast that benefits us and benefits others to like patient education and then conversations for clinicians. I feel like is what we provide on this
Right.
on this
Right.
on this podcast. And I feel like everyone's a patient from their own right, and then everyone's a clinician to their own body in that regard. So I think this really. I love doing it, but something you mentioned there about being a clinic, you run your clinic, find time for the podcast, so on and so forth, brings us to our very first episode, which was What is Wellness? And I was listening to a little bit of it this morning, and you were talking about how wellness is having a quiet heart. And it was perfect for me to go back and listen to this right now because I've started my fourth semester of PT school, which is known as like the hardest semester in our program. And then everything else that's going on. And I've noticed, Keone, in the last 1 or 2 weeks, my heart has not been quiet at all. not at all. I mean, it's pretty rough.
Which takes practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to revisit that and ask you, with everything that you have going on. I mean, because you're running a business, you're doing other things on top of that. How do you maintain your quiet heart?
Well,
what do you do when you lose it? Because it's got to be lost some point.
Well, what I do is remind myself that I have lost it, and get back into one of the other podcasts we did, which was on focused practice, and we talked a little bit about meditation there, and practicing some meditation, and it could be as far as like what you're grateful for, putting things in perspective that help you get back to maintaining your wellness and having that quiet heart. But I think overall, it's lifestyle issues, and one of the cheapest forms of medicine that we have at our disposal, and it's the easiest to do, is some form of meditation and thinking about what you're being grateful for. And I'm reminded of this every day. Or most days, where I have some very, very sick people come into my clinic because, me being a naturopathic physician, many of these people come into my clinic after, conventional medicine can no longer help them. And it was very interesting to me that one in particular person stood out and was talking about, their diagnosis, which was pretty much a devastating diagnosis. I think it was a cancer diagnosis at the time. Kind of brought them back to center to understand what they should be grateful for, and to stop wasting their time on the stuff that is in a sense meaningless. And one of our episodes, right, we talked about stoicism with Jade.
Yep.
And we went down the list of some of the little sayings that he kind of says to himself every day, and that the Stoics use. But one of them was memento mori, and it's remember death, which is kind of a morbid thing to say, but the Stoics never really meant it as a morbid thing. It was just like, basically life is short. Get the most out of it, and you know, learn from your failures, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so any failure you have is a learning experience. So
Which we touched on that in
so
the failure episode, which I think was
yeah, which we touched on. Yeah,
three.
we touched. Yep, yep. So it's just, you know, going back to focus practice and going back to meditation and realizing what is truly important. I think it's a tragedy, right? We get to the end of our life and all we didn't take the time to build experiences, and all we can remember on our life is that we are a slave to the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we're just, you know, we didn't take those vacations, we didn't take those trips, we didn't take the rest. We were just constantly on that you know, in the rat race, spinning our wheels, trying to make an extra dollar, and we lost our focus on what's really important.
Do you feel like you have I don't know, how do you, I guess, gain perspective other than, you know, is it just meditating, or is it, like you said, the Stoicism quotes do help you gain perspective, but do you do something in particular to gain perspective? I almost feel like my perspective is off. So it's like, I want to do more because I'm not doing this or this. So my perspective is like, my perspective to myself is not as nice as it would be to my friend, you know, Ben,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
Right, right. Yeah, we talked about that one of the episodes about being
Mm-hmm.
your own kind of like worst enemy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if you use that, hopefully it can help most of us. But you know, self-criticizing yourself because you're not doing enough, or you lose your perspective on what's important, is it's really, you just have to remind yourself to where that the constant reminder now becomes a habit for you. You know, so it's not that you get lost in this down spiral of negativity, or I'm not good enough or anything. You just, it's kind of like you have to remind yourself to center yourself, and this is part of the process, and try to enjoy that process, you know, as you get there. It's like you know, going to school. You know, what is the end prize? It's graduating from school. But did you go through it seeing it as a constant struggle, or could you have a fun time going through that struggle,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it as a challenge?
Right. Yeah. When you're like that down spiral, that's great. That happens all the time. You start going through that down spiral. What do you do to like put a pin in it, to slice that down spiral where it is? Is that where you begin meditating? I know, like, for instance, I see this on Jillian's Facebook or her Instagram. She's like always harping on the walk. You feel sad, go for a walk. You feel happy, go for a
Right.
walk. You feel stuck in a rut, go for a walk, so on and so forth, which is
Mm-hmm.
definitely agree with that. But is there something you do in particular, and even throughout the workday?
Well, one thing. There's a couple things. For one thing, I think Jill's hitting on, and we hit on this with some of our podcasts, is the medicinal power of just movement and
Yeah,
exercise, right?
yeah.
So that can bring you back to perspective. And then the other thing is thinking about just being aware of the environmental cues that kind of knock you off your kilter. And one of the biggest ones is being on the internet, and you know, you have, I don't know, work to do, whether it's study, or for me, we just finished up a couple chapters in an exercise book, and it's like you get on the internet and you're like, all right, I'm going to get this much done, and then all of a sudden you read sponsored content, you're off in
Yeah.
another direction, you know, and it's like
uh,
total loss of focus that you know, you're just wasting your time and spinning your wheels. So it really has to come back to being mindful, which we talked a lot about, right?
yeah.
um, um, and then in our, you know, one of our episodes we talked about how to become an expert. That's where we really talked about focus practice, right?
Yep.
People don't become experts based on how much time they spend spinning their wheels, so to speak. Like if you wanted to be good at the violin, you know, just practicing the violin for 2 hours is not as good as practicing it for 30 minutes and really being focused on what you're actually doing and being aware of how to get better, right?
Yeah.
So it's quality over quantity of time.
Yeah. And being intentful with it. Absolutely.
Having being intentful with it, and this got me really in undergraduate school, where it's like, oh yeah, I studied for 5 hours for this test, and really what it was I studied for like 15 minutes quality time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think I mentioned it in that podcast, something, and then like a question I've been asking myself to help reset my focus or keep that quiet heart is, what would this look like if it was easy? So if I wanted to be a good violin player, what would that look like if it was easy? Well, I'd sit down, I'd learn this, and it just provides like a step-by-step easy progression versus what I tend to do. And I feel like a lot of humans tend to do this, is just pile on more crap. Like we make it as hard as it could possibly be. And then that just creates a barrier for us even to do it. For example, like even with the podcast or something like that, do we want video? Do we want this? Instead, we just hopped on the computer and started. What would it look like if it was
Right.
easy? We'd just sit down, we'd record, and then we'd figure it out from there. And
We'd figure out a way, and that's the way when I got out of school. Is just like I jumped right in, like trying to start a business, run a business. And it was like, okay, it's like tossing a child into the swim pool. It's like, all right, sink or swim. You better figure it out along the way. And, when you're highly motivated to get it done, you'll figure out a way to get it done. And that's the best way to learn, actually, too, to be thrown right into it and
do you think,
doing it.
if you had to be honest with yourself at that time, did you maintain a quiet heart?
Well, so for example, as far as a quiet heart, it was it it allowed me to enjoy the process, but it wasn't like it was stress free by any means. I mean,
Right.
but I turned that stress and help and motivate me, instead of turning that stress into, oh, I'm completely overwhelmed and now I can't function.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is priorities. So if you're so overwhelmed and you're taking on extra obligations, that's only going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take on any extra obligations, because you will quickly become overwhelmed. And it's practice. I mean, over time, you get better at it. And then the other thing to think about is not taking it all on yourself. So for example, with me and you, using a team approach, it's much easier to, this project with the podcast, it's much easier to have people who kind of have a little bit different expertise in getting this podcast up and running and working together to get it done, instead of trying to take it all on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So a good leader, for example, probably doesn't know everything, but they certainly know where to find the experts and how to get things done. And a team approach is always better than trying to take on the world by yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about leadership a lot. It brought me, it just flooded in a bunch of questions about leadership, but that's.
Yeah. I mean, I as far as as far as being a leader, it's like, my thing is action, like get out there, try to do it. I mean, kind of have a plan, and along
Mm-hmm.
the way, you're going to run into some stumbling blocks. Try to enjoy the process along the way, instead of getting frustrated, because that will just, get, kind of inhibit your movement. But going back to the stoicism thing, I mean, that one of the things that Stoics said was the obstacle is the way. So when you hit those roadblocks, think about those are the times where you're going to learn the most.
Right.
When you hit those stumbling blocks. And so when you hit them, it's like, all right, this is it. Instead of being, oh, you're in fear, it ought to be, all right, this is cool. This is going to motivate me to get better and help me learn, that I'm at this roadblock right now.
Can it be true or false? A leader does show his emotions, or should show his emotions to his I guess, the people he is leading. We'll just leave it at
Yeah. Well, if you
that.
ask some of our political leaders, they would definitely say that's false. To me, I think it shows the human side of you, and it shows that you can be much more empathetic towards what other people are going through. So yeah, I think a leader at certain times definitely should show their emotions and all that. Uh, I think it just shows the humanness of it, and people can relate to that person much, much better.
How, what's something that you do to not complain? Is to always kind of look at the bright side, or at least not complain to anyone else? That's almost what I'm getting at with that leadership question. So you've got, people that work under you at your clinic, and you're leading them, but you certainly can't come in, Jesus, Bryan didn't get the podcast uploaded, da 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 da, and so on and so forth. So how do you? Yeah, it's just what kind of mental state do you put yourself in to kind of lead this ship, knowing what you're doing, and you're busy, and I'm sure certain days are better than other days, or certain days are not so great, but you don't necessarily bring that in.
Well, it's putting stuff in perspective. Like I think some people when they lose their perspective, they're overly stressed, and I
Mm-hmm.
think when you're overly stressed, you tend to make things a lot worse than it really is,
Yeah.
and so the mind can get away from you there. So it's really, it's like taking a few steps back and thinking about what is what is really important, and put it in perspective. And again, we talked about this, but the thing that really helps me with my stress, besides the meditation, is exercise and movement. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I have to do to help center myself. With my patients that are coming in, and they are in this negative mindset and dealing with an illness, whether it's physical or just mental, emotional, or just need to dump on somebody. um, I certainly don't want to add to that, and I want to be there to kind of reflect back on them, what they're actually saying, and help them to put their stress in perspective. And I to me, that goes back to being a good leader, being a good healthcare provider, is being able to uh, show empathy. It's interesting, Bryan, because I was reading this article on uh, narcissistic people, and it's really interesting that narcissistic people, they cannot, it's almost like they can't help themselves. And it was interesting what happens in the brain. They create neural connections where narcissistic people don't even know after a while how to read the emotions in somebody,
Mm-hmm.
you know like they don't even know how to be empathetic after a while, because they can't sense what's going on with that person. And
Yeah.
that's a not being able to do that, that's a you lost one of your ways to really connect with people.
Yeah. You certainly lost an aspect of being human. I would
Oh
say.
yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it comes back down to what we were talking about, and we did a number of episodes on this. It's like, to help other people, you certainly have to um, be well, focus and being well on yourself, whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically, trying to improve yourself. Because if you're a healthcare provider or a care provider for family members or somebody, if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of them as well either, right?
Yeah.
The people that you're in charge of. So you should be first in taking care of yourself. um, and then some very simple, powerful medicinal techniques that don't cost anything, is meditation and exercise. Those are really two powerful things. Putting things in perspective. So when you fail, we talked about this on the failure podcast. When
Yep.
you fail, that this is an obstacle, it's a learning experience move forward with, and you should try to put that in perspective. It's a learning opportunity. Focus, practice, using quality over quantity of time. Sleep being the main thing that acts like a reset button to allow you to put things in perspective. So let's say you're so overwhelmed and you're not sleeping, of course, because your mind is running away from you. You're trying to manage the monkey mind. I think that was episode 10. We talked about that. We talked about meditation. But if you're not sleeping, it's very hard to get back to focus. It's very hard to maintain your exercise regimen. It's very hard to study, to learn appropriately.
Yeah. And that almost takes us through episode like 1 through 10. So we were definitely, I was in my feelings and trying to get a good mind state as I was starting school, it seems like, with those first few.
Oh yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah, we did talk a lot about that. The other things we talked about, we talked a lot about dieting, like those first few episodes, right? Certain diets. We talked about
keto. That was a huge one.
Yeah, we talked about keto, the ketogenic diet. We talked about why diets tend not to work.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that sticks out for me with that is diets. What we find in the research with dieting is the more people diet, the more weight they tend to gain later on in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why you see with like that, the competition with the biggest loser, they also tend to be the biggest gainer after a while. It's always interesting to me why they never bring these people back on and see where they are in like 2 or 3 years, right? Because most of them have gained all their weight back and more. So we talked about in that episode on dieting, we talked about that, one of the biggest causes of fat gain in our society is, along with, being sedentary and just over consuming, is dieting itself.
Right. Yeah. And then we mentioned on episode 6, the burning calories easier episode, ways to just like kickstart your metabolism or, burn a few extra calories just in life, whether it be, temperature changes or anything else.
Right. Yeah. And one of the big ways was, in our time poor society is focusing on some high intensity exercise, and that's going to be different for everybody with their fitness level, but creating more density within the workout so that you have this afterburn effect long after the exercise is over. So you actually burn calories that way.
Yeah. We keep going back to less time, more results with every.
Less time, more results, quality. Think about quality. Yeah. And then when we were talking about the ketogenic diet, creating, one of the ways that you're burning fat is to test your body for ketones. And a lot of times when you do that, you're kind of in fat burning mode. The ketogenic diet's has a lot of research behind it. I think it's a decent diet to jumpstart burning fat, and you get a good objective measure by measuring blood ketones to assess whether you're getting there. And basically it's just, the ketogenic diet's a high fat diet. It's not a high protein diet. So it's not, it's not like an Atkins diet. It's a very high fat. It's kind of moderate protein, and then it's a very low carb type thing. And the ketogenic diet can jumpstart fat burning. For most people, I don't think it's a great diet long term, but it can certainly help with fat loss, among other things. It's been used to help people. Some of
epilepsy,
my
things like that.
Epilepsy is the big one, right? In children, that was how it kind of got into the research. But now we're finding it helps with other neurological disorders besides epilepsy, cancer. Certainly helps with fat loss. It's one of a really good way to help make you more insulin sensitive. So for diabetes, it can be great also for that.
Yeah.
And then we talked about longevity, right?
Yeah.
So the thing about longevity, we hit on quiet heart on this one, right?
And
having a quiet heart. Yeah, we talked about, and it brings us to the cocoa episode, right? Yeah. Chocolate has a lot of resveratrol, and it's been shown it's a great cardiovascular herb. It's interesting. Some of the research shows, even cocoa with the sugar added to it seems to have health benefit. but the quiet heart and longevity is a big one. Exercising in a way that's finding that Goldilocks point, not too much, but enough to keep you moving and keep your mind right. And what else was in that episode? We talked about certain supplements that could help besides a cocoa, and lab testing to assess it, right? So fasting insulin, and we talked about some of the inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. These are things that you can get done at your doctor to see. They're really markers of how quickly you're aging, especially hemoglobin A1C is a marker of how fast you're aging.
And that pretty much covers 1 through 10.
Yeah.
Sleep,
Yeah.
why you shouldn't diet, all that. Yeah.
And then when we look at 10 through 20, we pretty much talked about that. We did an episode on multivitamins, right?
Yep.
In that episode, so what we were talking about, what is a good multivitamin, and typically a good multivitamin should not have a lot of extra added ingredients in it, right? Like the colorings and the binders and stuff like that. It ought to just have its vitamins, and to get the most out of your vitamin, take it with food, and make sure that you're getting, instead of the mostly synthetic type vitamins, that you're getting the real component parts.
Yep.
And and that's a little bit different when we talk to
James.
Yeah, with the Nate formulations, and he talked about a whole foods based multivitamin. We contrasted that with a high potency multivitamin. So a whole foods based multivitamin, even though it doesn't have the high amounts of B vitamins and minerals and stuff in there, because it's a whole foods, it has all the other component parts that help like vitamin C work better than just using just the ascorbic acid, all the other components that come along with it.
What's funny about that is it almost goes back to the quantity, or the quality over quantity. You can have 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, but if it's not foods based, you're not going to get all that.
Right. So so we've been hitting on this, but episode 14 was about sitting, right?
Yeah.
One of the worst things you do for yourself is sitting. Well, our whole lives.
Good thing we're here, sitting.
Yeah, sitting down. I feel like I got to get up and run, but no. But combating sitting, right? It's a big cause of back pain. Big cause of definitely the middle weight gain. The sitting, the posture of sitting, what it does to your organs over time. And increasing blood flow to your vital organs. But it's one of those things, like as far as the obesity epidemic, it's being sedentary or sitting most of the time is a problem. We talked about standing desk and how to combat sitting in the workplace with that one.
Yeah, and you can
Burps training.
Yeah, and you can look up a variety of charts that show like the stress of the IV disc or the intervertebral disc that they're dealing with, what kind of loads. And sitting is notoriously one of the highest ones, where you're putting the most load on it. So it's more than standing, more than that type of thing, walking, all that kind of stuff. Sitting puts more stress on your intervertebral, the IV disc, what do people call it? Just your discs that are in your back.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. And posture is a big deal for a lot of the back pain, that we feel. Remember that we talked about the back muscles, the multifidus muscles.
Yeah.
Sitting doesn't gets those things, doesn't keep them toned, and so it's like, minimize the sitting time, and you're doing your health a lot of good.
Yeah, and if you have back pain, you've likely quieted that multifidus, and you need to kickstart it again with some exercise specific to it. So that was something we touched on there.
Yes.
I've touched on in another episode, but it's related to the sitting, is that 3-to-1 back ratio. So working your back muscles, your external rotation, everything behind you 3 more times than you're working like a bench or like a delt press or anything like that. So you should pull 3 times compared to 3 more times than you should just push.
Right. The sitting episode brings us to another episode, right? One of a cause of constipation is sitting too much. So
Mm.
we went, we hit on that with the constipation episode.
Uh,
Some of the things with constipation, the main things is, are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough fiber? Are you getting fat in your diet? Are you exercising? And one thing people tend to forget all the time is, are you getting the bitters in, right? That's
mhm.
why a lot of people like their coffee first thing in the morning to get a bowel movement going, get the peristalsis in the gut. If you are constipated, we hit on this in when we were talking about detox. If you're constipated, yeah, you're not using one of your body's main ways to detox. So having good bowel function is key to good health.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that surprised me the most. How much feedback we got that was positive. People are telling me they listened to it twice. I didn't know people were that full of shit.
Yeah, and I'm glad they don't think we are. So one of my favorite things that I use as far as food-based medicine too, and we talked about this in the spices episode, and the main thing with this that struck me is, when you look at the research on spices, these are power-packed, I mean, with phytonutrients, do your body good. Just about every spice you look at has benefit on it. And the neat thing about spices is, these are, when we look at a tier of as far as like more powerful packed phytonutrients, spices are there. And it's food-based medicine, but it goes a little bit beyond that. But significant benefit, talking about anti-cancer, helping control blood sugar, helping sensitize the body to insulin. All of the spices, you name them: basil, oregano, cocoa, curcumin, turmeric, just pepper, lowly pepper. I mean, all these things have so much benefit to the body and are backed by science. And that kind of leads into the episode where we talked about blood clotting, and spices actually can thin the blood too. One of the other ways to thin the blood is making sure, we always go back to this, Bryan, is like water intake,
Mhm.
increasing your water intake. That's one of the big ways to keep yourself from blood clotting. And then exercise, moving. Sitting is one of the biggest causes of causing blood clots.
Yep.
So, what else about that? I think that was the main thing. And then we shifted gears. We shifted gears. We went into um, uh, we talked about investing. What sticks
Mhm.
out for you with that?
Uh, for the investing podcast, I remember talking with Jeremy for episode 20 about cryptocurrency. And what sticks out to me about that is that bastard calling me and telling me that I should invest in cryptocurrency at that time. And
Uh-huh.
then it plummeted since then.
Well, so speaking of cryptocurrency, we talked about blockchain, and
Yeah.
and I think that the key with cryptocurrency is that the blockchain is a way to take out the middlemen in certain instances. So if you were buying a house, it would become much easier, and you wouldn't have all these associated fees,
Yeah.
Or if I'm at my clinic, and every time I swipe somebody's, credit card, the fees are not necessarily taken out. So basically you get to keep more of your own money. I mean, that's the main thing that stuck out for me. Now, as far as an investing strategy, yeah, at least this year, I think right after we did that episode, cryptocurrency took a dive, and it's still diving right now.
Yes.
So it may not be the best investment strategy, but the previous episode to that, we talked about wealth strategies. And
Mhm.
this is where we really wanted people to focus anyway, is understanding your mindset about wealth strategies. And I thought this was a really good episode. And we didn't have an expert on there. Me and you aren't certainly experts on this, but we talked about, remember, we talked about mindset, like the poor man's mindset, the middle class mindset, and the rich man's mindset. And, me and you were raised, I would say, but middle class primarily, right?
Mhm.
And basically the middle class mindset is, you go to school, you get a good education so that you can then get a job and then work the rest of your life for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the middle class mindset. You
That's
go live
exciting.
the American dream, you work in paycheck to paycheck, you have the white picket fence house, get married, all that middle class mindset. The rich man's mindset is, you are thinking about well into the future generations of your offspring, and investing for them and making sure that they are well off,
Mhm.
right? That's one of the things. And then also the rich man's mindset is, you're not going to be the worker bee, you're going to become the CEO. You make the rules, you're going to understand money, new innovation, you're going to be the entrepreneur, you're going to use other people's money to make money.
Mhm.
So that was a pretty good one. And then, we talked a little bit about investing as far as we know. This year we will actually have a retirement financial advisor expert on to talk about some of these things.
Yeah, the investing series will definitely continue.
Oh, it will definitely continue, but talking about cryptocurrency, that is not the primary way. I mean, I would think about, if you want to kind of invest in cryptocurrency, if you have extra money left over that you want to gamble, that's a real gamble right now. But some of the more conventional ways of saving,
Right.
we talked about whole life policies, IRAs, Roth IRAs, health savings accounts, that type of thing. That's really what you want to focus on. Maybe and then also focus on like the stocks and stuff like that, which I'm not an expert on, but it is something you want to get into as soon as you possibly can. And going to invest in cryptocurrency is not the way to go to begin with.
Yeah, definitely not. But like you said, the blockchain technology, I was listening to a senator actually talk about it. And it definitely seems like that is very useful and here to stay, like you mentioned. And she was
Yeah.
talking about it in supply chain management. And so, like, let's say we had like a listeria outbreak in tomatoes or something like that. They could use the blockchain to trace exactly where those tomatoes came from, what farm, so on and so forth. And you can kind of cut off the listeria outbreak that way. So she was kind of bringing it in supply chain management. And I thought that was the first thing I heard that was like, oh, I really get how this technology is useful now.
Yeah, and the more I get into it and think about it, I'm just like, yeah, it's gonna blow me away. And we're starting to see banking using it and big companies using it, but it's certainly not a great investment strategy unless you have a little bit of money to invest in, and who knows? I mean, we don't know yet, the cryptocurrency is going down, but if you were gonna invest in cryptocurrency, it's really cheap right now to buy. Who knows, it's gonna keep on going down though.
With it,
But
all right. So I got to switch gears on you and talk about the
yeah.
ME salad.
Oh,
Because
okay.
when we did that podcast, so that's episode 19. When we did that one, I had not made the ME salad. Since then, I've made the ME salad 4 to 5 times. I gotta say, damn, it's delicious, and I love it for lunch. It's like super invigorating to me for lunch. Just have all those greens and the mint and
Right.
everything.
Well, so the thing about that salad that I like, Ryan, is that salad can last a while, right? We
Yes.
talked about not putting certain things in that salad that will make it go bad quickly, right? You certainly don't want to add cucumbers to it, and you don't want to add onions to it, and you certainly don't want to have tomatoes in there. You want to kind of add those on freshly as you get your bowl of salad. So you have like this big tub of salad that you can hit all week. And it's gonna stay fresh for a week and a half, and then you can cut cucumbers up as you go. But that was the main thing. And then the other thing about that salad was finely chopping it, using lots of different colored vegetables. And the only complaints I get about that salad, which is good from a health perspective, is it makes you chew too much.
It does make you chew a fair amount. I almost can't finish it like in my 1 hour lunch break.
Right. Right, and you're packing a whole lot of fiber in there and a whole lot of phytonutrients in a little bowl. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're getting ready to prepare the salad, I know Keone mentioned it on the podcast, but I almost feel like he undersold it to us. You better get your damn chopping hat on because you're going to be chopping for this salad. You go blood, sweat, and tears into the salad, which is it. I love it. It's delicious, but are you going to be chopping?
By the way, that's a way to work on focused practice because you're going to be chopping. So you got to watch your fingers. Focus. Don't cut your fingers.
And think about having a quiet heart as I'm getting a little frustrated.
Quiet
chopping
heart
for 90 minutes.
It's a good way. Right. It's a good way to meditate, focusing on that salad. Remember we talked to Jillian. She did a couple episodes actually, but we talked about bile health, gallbladder health, liver support things. By the way, a lot of things in that salad help support liver and gallbladder health. Anything specific stand out on that? She was talking about bile function and
and it's how it's produced and released. And just what sticks out to me the most, and I've mentioned this, just how much I love this about the podcast, is we had her on like 1 or 2 weeks before we got into, I was taking this differential diagnosis class, and then we got into like gallbladder dysfunction, and I was like, oh man, I'm ready to go. That's what I that's what really sticks out to me is how she prepared me for class.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing about it was she was talking about um what the things that bile does. We just think about it as like a waste product. Bile secreted from the liver into the gallbladder. The gallbladder kind of stores it there, and when you eat, especially fats, it helps emulsify fats.
Mm-hmm.
um, and it kind of brings you back to the salad episode. One of the things we talked about on the salad episode is having a salad with non-fat dressing. Probably you're not going to absorb the phytonutrients in
Yep.
that. And one of the things that will help you absorb that phytonutrients is the emulsification of fat that helps you absorb things. The other thing about bile salts, it helps keep your bowel function healthy. So bile can be a slight irritant to the gut, which helps with peristalsis, which enables bowel movements, which can help constipation. So yeah, that was an interesting one. Episode 24, we talked about bone health. We talked a lot about exercise on that for bone health, and specific ways to exercise that are specific to bone health. So a doctor just telling somebody to go out and exercise and strengthen your bones, well, that may not help you a whole lot if your main form of exercise is swimming, because it mimics
Mm-hmm.
an anti-gravity environment. You want to use gravity to help with bone health. So plyometric type exercises, jumps, weight training exercises, or sports that cause your body to cut, move, put different stressors on the bones and muscular system. Talked about the muscles being, if your muscles aren't strong, usually your bones aren't going to be strong. So those two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
What about surgery? Remember that one? Talked about that. Anything stick out there?
Pre and post surgery, not so
Yeah.
much. Just with pre, making sure you're aware of what you're getting into. And as far as what I remember from a PT's perspective that I said on there was, you want to kind of maintain, preemptively prepare yourself to maintain range of motion, eat healthy, so you're ready to go into that inflammatory process and that healing process with, I guess, with all your soldiers, for lack of a better term. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So supplementation can certainly help pre and post surgery. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just real simply, vitamin C before and after can helps heal. The other thing we talked about was, uh, one of the things that surgeons don't like people to do, because it exposes yourself to infection, is shaving your body beforehand. Like, you probably
Hmm.
shouldn't shave your face. You probably shouldn't shave anything, because it creates microabrasions, which leads you open to infection. Um, that's a big one that surgeons kind of skim over and don't really say, but that is something that will keep you from getting some of these hospital acquired infections. But using supplements to help with surgery is a big deal. And one of the biggest things with surgery is adhesions, especially if you have major surgery, abdominal surgery. You want to try to minimize the scarring as much as you can. There are certain supplements that may do that, and one of them is bromelain, or some of these enzymes that you would take between meals, that can actually maybe inhibit scarring.
Mm-hmm.
So
And getting your mobility back as soon as possible. And,
getting
there's
your
always different precautions based off whatever surgery you had or so on and so forth. But yeah,
right,
mobility is huge, because that speaks on the adhesions that you mentioned. It even goes down to the skin. If you have
right,
um, a scar on your skin, that scar tissue can go all the way down to the fascia and so on and so forth, further down into the body, restricting motion. So
yep,
maintaining that range of motion before and after the surgery is going to be super helpful to you.
right. And then we had the opportunity to talk to Marianne, the pharmacist, who we'll probably have on again this year, and she talked about drug-induced nutrient deficiencies. Well, with surgery, part of your surgical protocol is you want to make sure that you're very aware of the drugs that you are on before going into surgery, any sensitivities to drugs. There's even some genetic tests out there that will show whether you can tolerate certain drugs. But in her episodes, we talked about some things like, there's certain drugs where you definitely want to use nutraceuticals to help with some of the side effects of those drugs. One of the things that stuck out with me that she brought up was the statin drugs, and maybe supplementing with CoQ10 and B vitamins, because it does cause like a sometimes an outright deficiency or subclinical deficiency there. But she's a great resource. And we gave her information on that podcast for people to go through their drug list. I really like pharmacists because they are the people you want to talk to about, your medications.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talked about comprehensive cancer approach using a team, right?
Yep.
Here we went back to one particular spice we talked about quite a bit was turmeric, or more specifically, the main active constituent turmeric, which is curcumin, which has a significant anti-cancer effect. We hit on fasting a little bit in here, and we also hit on the ketogenic diet in there also in that episode. That was episode 29.
Yep. And then the holy grail of them all, episode 30, all about magnesium.
Magnesium. I mean, yeah, I think we hit on that like almost every time we were talking about, every time we did an episode just about, but yeah, magnesium does so many things. Like if I had to say what is the most powerful, best nutraceutical out there that has such low toxicity and it's good for everybody is pretty much magnesium. And one of the reasons why most of us are subclinically deficient in magnesium is because we don't make that ME salad, or another way to say it, we don't eat enough vegetables, because magnesium is very high in vegetables. But yeah, magnesium is key. It's one of the nutraceuticals I use the most. And then we had an interesting episode with Jade. Remember that? Erectile dysfunction. I mean,
I do.
That one this one's very important for all the men out there, and women too, but definitely men. In this one, the main thing that stuck out here was God, what did he say? The average male penis size is what? Like at erect is like 3.5 inches. Well, that certainly made me feel much better about myself. But, but anyway, he talked a lot about that with men, that the main issue with erectile dysfunction, he says he sees this in men, no matter what their age, is mainly it's a psychological thing. It's more of a psychological thing than a actual physiological thing.
Yep, and he gave us the point and shoot metaphor for the parasympathetic and sympathetic system having to.
Yeah, that's a great episode, and he gave us some things that men can do to help mitigate that. But I thought it was interesting as far as the whole mostly psychological for men.
And I remember he said something in there that there was a study done, or he mentioned that if you watch porn before you go like weight lift, your testosterone is going to go up. So I have yet to try it, but I'm certainly I've certainly thought about it once or twice before I go do a deadlift session.
Right, and then contrast that, we got a little bit. Jade seemingly saying, okay, here's a benefit of porn for men, but then remember Dr. Ralph Esposito, where we were talking about prostate health, we hit on porn, and he was like, yeah, just porn over time is a bad thing to get into for certainly, and he's talking about the studies show that it doesn't really help so much your sex life. I think he was mostly talking about that because of porn, expectations are such that
can't be met.
Yeah, the bar is set too high. Let's just put it that way. But anyway, that was a very, very interesting one there.
I think I told my mom not to listen to those. She listens to all of them. We've got a few coming out, one with Jade and one with Dr. Esposito. I would just skip those.
Yeah.
One time, I can't remember which podcast it was, Keone, but I got to tell you this. She was listening to one podcast and she calls me or texts me, and you had made a joke about condoms or something about having sex, and you were like, "Isn't that right, Bryan?" Da 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 da. And I got a call from her. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's yeah, well, I'll call her out on some other episodes this next year. I'll say hi to her during them. So the other, we hit on intermittent fasting quite a bit. We talked about it as a strategy for fat loss. We talked about it as a strategy for resetting your body and for detoxing. I mean, the research on intermittent fasting is phenomenal. We also hit on it as a strategy for improving longevity. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed that. That was a really good podcast, and I think people will get a lot out of that. Yeah. Then we switched gears. We talked about kombucha and how to make it with Jillian.
Yep.
She gave us the whole lowdown on that, how to go ahead and do that.
And I learned
If
that
you haven't
it's
tried,
SCOBY, not
just
Scooby.
yep, SCOBY, yep, symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast is what that stands for. But yes, having your SCOBY and the many uses of it, if you
Yeah.
want to use that. What else did we talk about? Oh, with her, we also talked about desserts.
Yes.
How to make desserts. I think that was episode 39.
39.
Yes.
39. Yeah,
And then
there's a
we
bunch of things in there, how to make them healthier, different substitutes, a variety of things in there that are very useful.
episode 35 I really like because we talked about like for me and you, and a lot of stuff, even though we a lot of things we don't necessarily agree on, which is great. But also we talked about in this episode, we talked about like questioning your beliefs and really understanding that we all have significant biases and we need to keep them in check.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to keep ourselves in check with thinking that our way is the right way. So whether you're Democrat, Republican, whether you're Christian or Muslim, whether, whatever your beliefs are, whether you believe, whether you're, you know, pro-abortion, anti-abortion, whatever, like really questioning your beliefs, understanding your biases, because and using that to find the truth, right? Because usually the truth, I think the big thing we hit on there was the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle, or it's not usually, you're 100% correct and the
Right.
other person is 100% correct. So question your beliefs. What about the Homo Deus discussion? That was interesting too. That kind of goes into what we were just talking about, question your beliefs. Meaning,
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is using science as a metric, right?
Yeah.
To help finding truth in the world.
Yeah. Great read. I think that's all
Yeah,
necessarily we need
great
to do
read.
on that one. If you read it,
Yeah,
don't
and
listen.
yeah. The thing we talked about there was the whole phenomenon around dataism, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how your computer knows more about yourself than you do now, probably.
And I'm ready for
So
it to make decisions. Tell me what to do with career.
right,
I'm ready for it to start
right.
driving me. All that.
Yeah, which we're heading to that. But yeah, the computer, with just, what was it, like 300 clicks or something, the computer knows more about you than that you probably consciously know about yourself. And using data to, I think there's an example of using data to find a partner that you know is gonna
Ideal
suit you
match.
better
Yeah.
than what you would think would. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, that was very interesting. We talked about cheap and healthy travel. We talked about airline travel, things to do while you're on a plane to keep yourself healthy.
Yep. And how to maintain it cheaply, whether you're traveling or whatnot, and also maintaining that health. So yeah, we
Right,
talked about doing it.
drinking plenty of water while you're on the flight and getting up and moving too if you're taking
Yep.
long flights.
That's what I was going to say. We talked about those burst of exercises.
Yep. One excellent episode that I just learned a ton from was Dr. Eric Lewis talking about hemochromatosis, and
Our
that's
most downloaded one.
Oh yeah, okay.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, yeah.
I mean, such good information in that one. And the thing that really hit me from there was that the hemochromatosis is on a spectrum, and along that spectrum of increased iron in your blood, having increased iron in your blood is not a good thing, neither for men or women. You can have all kinds of complaints with it. But the main thing there was that being in that spectrum, you may have hemochromatosis and may never get it diagnosed, even with all the tests, but you can still have it. You just have to. You're kind of on a spectrum. So sometimes, like, really looking at your iron, there are genetic tests that can diagnose it, but sometimes it goes a lot more than just a genetic test. We have all his website information, book information up on the you can find it on the listing of the podcast, but definitely check him out.
Yep, that's episode 41, just for ease of getting there.
Episode 45, this is one that I really love, with Dr. Bryan,
Yes.
Showman Brown. Man, I love her videos. I mean, I check her videos out. She's such an inspiration to me with her deadlifts, her muscle ups. I mean, I'm watching her do muscle ups, and I'm like, damn, I wish I could do those things. But she does them with such ease. But anyway, she is a physical therapist also, and it was
Hmm.
just great listening to you guys talk about the deadlift and how to do that right, which I've since been doing a ton of, and it's really, really helped me in the gym.
How's your back feel since you've been doing a ton of them?
Man, I'll tell you what, man. I mean, better. I mean, much, much better.
Good.
Especially if you get especially if you get the form right. And
Hmm.
not don't try to do too much. I mean, I see her, deadlifting 300 pounds. I'm certainly not doing that kind of weight, but I'm getting the form down and getting stronger and stronger. I mean, it's one of those movements that is really right up there. I mean, I think it's just as important as the squat as for like total body, functional movement.
It's as human as it
So,
can get. Pick that shit up off the ground.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of back pain, right? We talked about, all right, you were talking about like spinal stabilization and fighting back pain, episode 44. I mean, I feel like the deadlift has really helped me with that, but we got a lot more specific in that episode about how to help with back
Yeah.
pain.
Big three things. Takeaway was the transverse abdominis, that oblique muscle. I think it was the internal oblique, if I'm remembering it correctly, and the multifidus. Those three together create that
Right,
abdominal corset. You want to use that abdominal corset as you go throughout life, your day, lifting, all that type of stuff.
right, right.
Episode
Episode
44.
40. Yeah, that was episode 44. Before that episode, we talked about gout. Lots of things you can do. Gout is a type of arthritis. Lots of things you can do in your lifestyle to prevent that happening. One of them being is stop drinking the alcohol so much, and over consuming. Plenty of water. Again, we talk about water, 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 just like magnesium throughout here. But drinking plenty of water can keep that uric acid, those uric acid crystals from forming in your joints. But we talked a lot about lifestyle stuff that will help with that.
Yeah, that's another
Another,
one I got to give a big shout out to because I went into school 1 week later, Keone, and the teacher says he had a gout attack in his knee. He had fluid drained out of it. He's showing us his knee. People are
yep,
asking irrelevant questions. And I felt like a gout master after that episode. So that,
yeah,
that was great.
yep. And it's for me, it's really nice for my patients to be like, oh yeah, all right, well just go listen to our episode. It's on the Wellman's podcast. You can download it. A lot of good information there. Instead of going through it verbally and writing it all down during the visit, it's nice to just give them the link to that.
Yeah, and you might
So
forget
yeah,
something or anything like that. That's why
yeah,
I think, yeah, we
yeah,
really do provide, patient education here. We break it down by
right.
back pain, gout, Parkinson's, so on and so forth. Whether you're a relative of someone with Parkinson's disease for episode 46 or something like that, you can just start your education there and truly
Yep.
take some ownership in your health.
Right. And with that Parkinson's episode, we talked about, some natural things that can really help keep the dopamine around
Hmm.
in the brain. Parkinson's being a disease where the neurons, the dopaminergic neurons, tend to die. And there's a lot of ways of helping that. Exercise is a big key in Parkinson's too. That was a big thing we talked about there. So that brings us, we talked about the food-based supplements with James, but it
We
brings
did.
us now to episode 48, progress in the world. The thing that sticks out with me with this, and I get caught up in this, man, if you watch the news, man, it just seems like, the world is just falling apart. I mean,
Hmm.
it's one bad thing after another, and it's never, never, never ending. And if you watch the news, now you have this perspective that is of negativity of everything going on in the world. But when you really look at the data and the science, what we find is this is the best time that to live on this planet that there ever has been in all the parameters, health wise, financial wise. Poverty is the lowest it's ever been worldwide. And we specifically talked about a book in that episode called Enlightenment Now. And
Yep.
that's a book that I would have people, it's Steven Pinker's book, to read to get a different perspective. He goes into the data and just shows us that our worldview for a lot of us is shaped by the negative news, and it's not necessarily true. This goes back to questioning your beliefs and using science to help you with that.
Hmm.
And then another great episode I really like with Dr. Leslie Myers, her approach with really focusing on the nervous system and gut connection. Really, this goes back to what we talked about initially, was the quiet heart, using meditation, focusing on the mental emotional aspect of the body. That's a big key to helping your health, and how that affects, one of the first systems that gets impacted by your mental state is the gut.
Yeah.
And so, think about it, right? If you're sitting down to a meal, and then or if you're being chased by a tiger, think about how your gut, and you're starving, you're being chased by a tiger or being threatened with your life, you're not going to be hungry anymore. Your body just shifts, that nervous system shifts to shutting down the whole GI system to fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
So your mental state is huge with helping your gut. So being in sympathetic mode instead of parasympathetic mode, the rest and digest, is key. I think we even mentioned on there that a lot of people are eating their meals in their cars. That's not great over the long term with your gut. You're not going to digest appropriately, constantly being on alert while you're driving. You ought to really sit down to a meal and enjoy the meal, because it helps you get your mind right, which then helps get your gut right.
Yeah.
So, and then episode 50, we talked
Long
about
overdue.
Long overdue. We should have done that way ahead, but talked about acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, and how it is. It used to be like woo-woo medicine, and it was kind of poo-pooed by the conventional community, but now there's lots of research, Western research, going in on that, and a couple studies that I've been involved in through Wake Forest University and MD Anderson, on hot flashes and xerostomia, which is dry mouth, and acupuncture seems to be one of the few treatments, non-invasive treatments that helps with all that. We talked about cupping in that episode. We talked about moxibus. We talked about just the basics of traditional Chinese medicine, and I use a lot of that in my clinic, and how acupuncture is great for pain management, may be part of the key for helping with the opioid epidemic that we're experiencing in this country now.
Yep. And then episode 51, I would consider it long overdue for me. That was the Kettlebell 101 episode.
Yep.
Talked about hip hinge versus a squat, how to do them properly, how to set yourself up properly, and kind of check your form and what type of things to keep in mind. And exhaling on the exertion when we exercise was a big thing we mentioned there, creating that spinal stabilization.
And you also brought up kettlebell swings, like if you're going way above your head, which I've been guilty of, that may not be the best thing to do.
Yeah, please don't. You said it as nicely as you said a lot.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, again, I learned something every episode that we do, or especially with our guests. But yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
What else?
So we skipped a few, but that's the Well Man's podcast year one.
Yeah, that is it, year one. So what changes are we gonna make this year? Well, one of the things I gotta apologize to everybody out there, my muffled voice. We're gonna definitely make that better.
We got a new microphone on the way.
We got a new microphone on the way. So I think we had some comments over the years on me sounding like I'm in a cave, but anyway.
Some nice, some not so nice.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's always interesting to me seeing those comments. But anyway, don't take it personal, people that got mad out there. We're gonna make it better. We are gonna improve.
We're certainly gonna improve. And it's been my great pleasure to do this, just in the fact of I've really seen that, like, for instance, when we had Jeremy come on and talk about cryptocurrency, we got off the podcast and I called him after the podcast and he was like, man, that is a muscle, like being able to communicate like this and, drive the conversation forward and keep it coherent and succinct and so on and so forth. And I've just loved developing my communication on this podcast and kind of going through that phase of developing this and hopefully making me a better clinician when I get out there to be a clinician, and just communication overall. I definitely learned that less is more as I'm rambling. I learned that less is more for sure with communication.
Right. We talked about it on episode 2, right? in a conversation, one of the most important things you can do, especially when you're having a conversation with somebody else, you'll get more out of it, is really practicing in your listening skills too. Instead of, when you're talking with somebody, a lot of us will communicate with people and we are constantly thinking about what else we're going to say instead of really listening.
Right.
That's a big part of communication, like really listening.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something that takes a lot of practice for me, and it's something I have to remind myself quite a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, other changes, I don't know. We got the microphone on the way.
Yeah.
That's going above and beyond for you guys. It's a damn free podcast.
Well, the other thing we're going to do, no longer I'm going to be sitting here in my underwear, right? We're going to do, it is going to be video now for this next year, right?
We're going to try and put some video up there on YouTube for sure. We can upload the old episodes and the new ones as they roll out. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that was some of the comments I got too. Like they'd rather see video instead of just having it audio.
Okay. So you got comments about that, Keone? I know we've had a few
Yeah.
people who have come on and
Yeah.
asked us. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and maybe even posting some of the video clips to, get people involved. And then the other thing I really love is people's comments. Another big change we're going to do this year is we're going to have a lot more guests on, a lot more experts on. I mean, I really love having the guests on because you learn so much from them. So
Mm-hmm.
so anybody out there who has recommendations or who wants to be on the podcast, who is an expert in something, and remember, we all are experts in something. We certainly have certain things that we know better than other people, and it could be anything, whether it's being able to, I don't know, you're an expert at tying shoes. I mean, we want you on.
We do. Should we double knot or not?
That's right.
Yeah.
How should we have our laces in our shoes? So yes, want you on.
I mean, I'm impressed we did it for a year. I'm super happy. We did it for a year without messing up, and I started school at the same time. So that makes me feel a little pumped up about that we were able to maintain this.
Yep.
Super happy.
Yeah, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna try to keep maintaining it. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, Bryan, that you're able to do that while going to school. When I was in medical school, I don't know if I could have done something like this. But again, the whole teamwork approach can make it easier.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And it is us. So we love hearing comments from you guys, like Keone was mentioning, or getting the emails from you guys or anything about that. It warms my heart to see people talk about this on Facebook, or for me to go to class and someone tell me they listened to the constipation episode twice. It just blows me away. I have, for sometimes we'll have an exam and it'll be a super stressful day, and I'll get out and I'll check the numbers, and 100 people or plus or so downloaded the podcast that day, and it's just like, man, that is so cool to me. So I greatly appreciate anyone listening to us.
Yeah, and I appreciate comments, polite or rude. Actually, I learned from all.
Yeah, exactly. We are not biased toward the comment, whether anything.
It helps me with my quiet heart when I read the rude comment.
It helps in practice. Right. Focus practice.
Yeah, again, it's focus practice, and it's going back to that place. It's all right. Well, does this person have a point, or is he just being a dick?
Uh-huh.
And usually he has a point. He or she has a point.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So letting go of my biases, focus, practice, quiet heart. Thanks for everything, everybody. Looking forward to next year.
Yeah, we are looking forward to next year. If you can help us spread the word of the Well Man's podcast, please do, whether that be a review on the service that you listen to the podcast on, or just telling your friend about it or your neighbor. We greatly appreciate, and we want to help as many people as we can. So if there's a specific topic that could help someone out, whether it be your friend, family member, or whatnot, we would love for you to share that with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give us any sort of feedback, topics you want to hear covered, anything like that. We want to know how we can better serve you, and that is definitely our goal. So we look forward to talking to you next year.
All right. Take care, everybody. See ya.